Welcome everybody. We have got a slightly different episode today, that we thought it was really important to share this initiative. So I've known Joe for a couple of years now, and I've seen firsthand the benefits of his bi-weekly participation in an initiative known as MKP, the Mankind Project. It's a space and a place for men to connect, be seen, heard, and listen to each other. So every couple of weeks, he heads into the woods and emerges a completely different person. So welcome, Joe. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. It'd be great if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners and watchers.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm a Coaching Outdoors advocate, and I've not really got much in the way of high-level qualifications, but what I have done is I've always spent a lot of my time outdoors through my work as a tree surgeon, or arborist is the more professional term. And growing up in a small village, ended up always out and about with a gang of mates, just scrambling around the place. So I've been a tree surgeon for about 15 years now. Did that because I was passionate about thinking I was saving the planet, getting outdoors, working with trees and working outside. And slowly there's been a progression towards realizing that actually I'm probably not saving the planet. I'm driving around in a big truck and chipping lots of trees, and not often are we preserving trees, which is what arboriculture is meant to be about. So beyond that, yeah, I'm someone who loves being outside, I think I'd say.
And I think pretty much every one of our listeners and watchers shares your love for the outdoors as we do. Before we actually dive into your experiences with Mankind Project, we ask every single one of our guests on the podcast, the first question is always the same question, and it would just be lovely to find out what your earliest memory is of being in the outdoors and why you enjoy the outdoors so much. Where does your love for the outdoors come from?
So I touched on growing up in a village, and we were quite lucky to have the mill house at the bottom of the village. In the garden of the mill house, there's a very, very well-established, mature, beautiful walnut tree when I was growing up. And I can remember saying to my mum and one of her best friends when we were having they were having a tea and a natter, and I was a kid, quite young still. I said, "Oh, I love looking at the tree's leaves." And they both quite nonchalantly sort of looked over their shoulders and, "Oh, well, that's because we used to put you out there in the pram when you were crying." And I was a bit dumbfounded. I thought, what, you didn't love me, sort of thing. But it was more a case of they just put me there and I enjoyed it. I think that seemed to work to stop me crying. So my earliest memory is of being sat under that beautiful mature walnut tree with its really distinctive foliage. And I don't remember being sad about it. It's not like I feel traumatized by trees and I'm trying to get my revenge, but it's it's sitting up looking at this beautiful arching dividing shape and there's just this lush green canopy through sunlight dappled through. I believe that's my earliest. I think I may have latched onto that thinking it is, but either way I'm sticking with it. That's mine, I think. And your other question was, what do I love about being outside? I think it's just bearing in mind, holding that knowledge that it will all change, whether it's the weather or the job or the season itself or the years and those turning into decades. It all just keeps rolling on. It keeps changing. And I love that reminder every day that it's very rare that we do work in heavy rain all day. And if we do, it's not always heavy rain. It changes into some different type of rain. So I feel more alive outside than I do. Often I feel my life's a bit in reverse because often I spend my evenings at home trying to get something worked out on the computer, or my weekends I'm driving around in my car trying to see quotes, and there's a lot of not outdoors time. Whereas my belief is most people live the opposite to that, and it's offices all week and then outdoors when they can through choice. And I can't believe people live like that. I'd be really struggling with that. I mean, I've got a mental health story running, and the things that benefit me are being outside, certainly. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that kind of earliest memory. And often, what is our earliest memory? What have we been told? That all kind of blends together. And then that's that narrative that we kind of retell ourselves again and again and again. But it always just is kind of a unifying story for all of our listeners, and everyone will kind of associate to a part of it, regardless. So today, we'd love to dive into the Mankind Project. You've been a part of it since February 2016. And it would just be helpful if you're able to just kind of give our kind of listeners and watchers just a little bit of information about the group. Like, what is it?
The Mankind something isn't something that I heard about or knew about. I didn't really know there were any men's groups running. So the Mankind Project is a men's group. I believe, I haven't actually researched this, it's just what I've heard from other men. It was started in America by three men who are quite different. One, I believe, this may be total myth, but one had a background in the military, one had a background in sciences and psychology, and one was much more of an artist. And they got together and decided that something needed to be done. And that something was, as the tagline for Mankind Project is recapturing the sacred masculine. So we hear a lot about toxic masculinity and all that sort of stuff. And these three men decided that they were going to do something. So to me, Mankind Project is a framework where I can go and I can support and be supported by men, where there's very little judgment. And some of the men I don't really know that well. I'm not there to meet and greet and make friends. I'm there to support and be supported by other men as they go through their struggles. And there's a large part of what we do in MKP is based around shadow work, looking at the thoughts and the feelings or the parts of you that either hide, repress, or deny. And we do a fair bit of work on bringing those out through facilitation work between just the men who are there. There's no necessity for people to be qualified at anything, because the framework that MKP provides is so structured and has so much support, and there's so much backstory and reading to it, should you choose to, that the support's there. You can't really go wrong. And then you've got that second layer of the support from the men standing beside you if you're the one doing the work. So yeah, I'd say that's what I feel the MKP is. It's an organization of men for men to listen and to be supported by, to listen and be heard. Yeah.
I think it sounds like such a really great project, and we're going to dive in more detail in what you talked about, the structure that's there, and into what that structure is as we go through today. It'd be really interesting though to find out a little bit more about how you found the MKP, or the Mankind Project. How did you get involved in the first place? Where did you hear about it, and why did you decide to give it a go yourself?
I think that, so to answer that, there's a bit more of sort of the story of Joe to come in. So why did I decide to get involved was because I was feeling quite lost, and I've been struggling for a fair while with depression. I would name it now, but when it was happening, I didn't know. So back in 2001, my sister died. She was 8 years older than me, and she died very suddenly and of very natural causes. It was really, really rare, and it hadn't really been explored very much by medical science. So it was just a freak death, really. But because it was such a freak death, it really knocked me and my family, and as I said, growing up in the village, the whole village just it was just a real shock. And we've had a couple of those in the village of just real surprise deaths through either, you know, misadventure or young people dying early was the shock for the village, really. And certainly for me it was. So from 2001 onwards, I was supported by a bunch of friends who didn't really know how to support me at agricultural college, as I had a vague idea that I wanted to be a tree surgeon back then. That rolled into me traveling to Australia with a bunch of those friends. Again, not really knowing how to support me through what I was struggling with, me not knowing how to ask for anything else. I had a brief few sessions with a college counsellor who was lovely, but that's all it was really. So, you know, drinking a lot, just clattering about a bunch of 20-year-old friends, traveling around Australia, and I ended up staying out there for about a year. I think everyone else, me and 4 other friends, they all came back before me. I stayed out there for a fair old while, and then decided that I thought it'd be a good idea to come back. So then became a tree surgeon, qualified, got a job with a really lovely boss. And after a while, I found myself driving to work in tears and not really functioning very well, but managing to just have this veneer of being all right. And, you know, my love life just kept lurching from one lovely girlfriend to another who it just fell apart in the end. So it's a bit of a sad story, but on the outside, I was this cartoon character of myself, desperate to say the funny line, be the best silly dancer at the party. And it all came to a head really when I decided, when I went to Australia the first time, sorry, that previous time, I spent a month in New Zealand and loved it, and just felt I had to get back to New Zealand. And when I first started work with my boss in 2003, or 2004, sorry, as a tree surgeon, I basically served a modern apprentice with him. Straight away I said, I'm going to New Zealand soon. He said, all right, yeah, good luck with that. Hope that works out. It took me 10 years to manage to get to a place where I felt I could go, and I was mentally able to separate myself from the life I had and get out there. And the sense of relief I felt, one of my best friends at the time drove me all the way to Gatwick, and the relief I felt from dropping my luggage on that check-in belt was just unreal. I don't think I've felt anything like it since, because I knew for me that was an opportunity to stop and to see where I was at and pause, rather than just blindly trying to carry on and pretend that things were all right, because I didn't know what was wrong. I had no awareness that maybe I could ask someone that things didn't feel right, or take a trip to the doctor. Any of this stuff just wasn't in my awareness. So I feel I've got this sort of heightened sense of maybe I do know what it's like for young men who are struggling now, which we'll obviously come on to later on. So I came back from New Zealand completely revived, recharged. I'd done a 10-day meditation retreat where you'd sit in silence for the whole 10 days pretty much. I decided to stop drinking because I just had another string of stories that just weren't the stories I wanted to tell, and it was just embarrassing, but it was more Joe's drunk too much stories. I met some fascinating, amazing people who I'm still in touch with, just lovely people giving me opportunities for new direction, and I grasped at it. And I came home and I was like, I'm fixed, it's all right. I went back to my old job, and then a year later I was in the same spot, just as depressed as I'd ever been, which was really difficult for me. But through that journey I'd picked up a set of tools, a metaphorical toolbox that I could pull things out and try different methods of just trying to get through the struggles I was in. And how I heard about MKP, to answer another part of your question, I was helping out because I was sure that I wanted to help kids, and I wanted to get kids reconnected with nature. So I was either directed to by a good friend, or I found a local company called Hidden Woods, where they do preschool, forest school stuff. So you just turn up for an hour and a half with your preschool kid, come and make something in the woods. You can be making a little acorn shower cap for your little acorn elf, or a front door for your pixie in the woods, in a tree stump or in a tree trunk, or you might have toddlers just having a go with machetes, just trying to cleave wood apart, just God's eyes with weaving, just all sorts of beautiful things. But it's outdoors, rain or shine. You've got this lovely host, this lovely host called Barney, who's just like a magician, and Steve is the owner of the company, and they're just the loveliest men you'd ever meet. They've got nothing to do with MKP. One of the dads that was bringing his firstborn and then his secondborn son, he spotted me, and after a while he said, "Joe, I'm going to make you an offer that you may refuse, but I've got something that I think might help you." And it was the initiation weekend, which the structure of MKP is you can go along to these eye groups, which is what I go to every fortnight, and they happen almost globally, like anywhere in the world where there's men who don't feel quite right and have had the awareness to look around and ask for help. These eye groups happen, and you can sign on to MKP as an initiated man and join any one of these groups when you find out where it is, what time it is, if you need to pay to have access to the land as we do, or the use of a village hall or someone's front room, whatever it is, however it's set up. So I went, instead of going and, like testing the water, just going along to an open night, I ended up diving straight into a 3-day weekend over in Ireland of basically what would, by any other definition, would be called a rite of passage now. So they basically, they're not very nice to you at the start of this weekend. They do all sorts of things that make you feel quite uncomfortable and question what you're doing. But that's all part of the initiation weekend, and I came away just radiating, I'd say confidence, but that might not sound appealing to many people listening. But I just knew that I was all right and that this was good for me. And it was a massive feeling, and it gave me so much. And those weekends are staffed by men who are already initiated. So there's this elevation of who you are in MKP, but by the more service you do, the more responsibility you get given on those initiation weekends. And there's also something that follows those called PIT training weekends. So that's primary integration training. So you become a lot more familiar with the framework of what happens at a eye group. So I think that's all of your questions. I'm not sure.
And we really appreciate you being so candid about your backstory and how it has led you to kind of this moment in time, and just having an awareness of that, and what really, when you're in it, you often kind of can't see what is actually going on. Your life, your story, you're kind of part of that narrative. So it's really difficult to take that step back and be kind of quite objective about it. So for you to have this kind of hindsight and to kind of signpost the golden threads, hopefully it'll give permission to some of our listeners, potentially male listeners, to kind of really acknowledge, like, where are they at this moment? And is there something that, might benefit them? This opportunity to kind of meet just, with men, and to openly talk. Because it's something about, within our society, we're kind of quite isolated on so many levels. It's that kind of real conundrum that we're more connected than we've ever been before, but actually the feelings of loneliness and rates of mental health and depression are just, it's so sad. And what can be done? And this is actually something that you can do. You can look for your local group, and thank you for talking us through this kind of whole initiated process. And within kind of coaching conversations, there's often an element of shadow work. Yes, there may be an element of kind of structure, and I know we'll kind of come on to the archetypes in kind of as we kind of continue our interview, which again is something that coaches that we can use within our toolbox. So it would just be great to get a bit of a flavor for these kind of bi-weekly sessions. Part of the reason that you've been invited on is very much that yours are, they are outdoors, and the outdoor setting for you holds that kind of really kind of special connection. So it would just be great if you could just kind of describe us to it.
Yeah, to go back and just say, you say we've never been so connected, but that's, to me, that's very true, but that's only face value. I mean, spoken to people all through my life, and some of them don't know my dreams and fears, but I count them as very close friends. And it's that willingness to go deeper and to trust someone. And for us meaning the men I stand beside around this fire, the trust comes through seeing these men struggle, and it's not forced. It takes some time for some men to open up, but it's that feeling of being connected with someone else comes from standing beside them through time. I feel, yeah. So connection can be a funny one, certainly, and I didn't have any idea how unconnected I was to people closest to me, because I was so intent on being this funny, happy person, which took a lot of energy, and it drained me. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one about connection. We meet. We are the Bath Eye Group, and we meet a fair way outside Bath, maybe 20 minutes outside Bath, in a beautiful wood, which was a quarry. It's not really a wood, sorry, it's more of a copse of trees, if I'm going to make myself sound like a tree surgeon. It's a small woodland that used to be a quarry, and it's got this really beautiful, we've nicknamed it, someone nicknamed it once, it's called NLP, not because of the psychodynamic counseling, whatever that neuro-linguistic programming. It's because it's nicknamed nature's loving palm, because it's this, you're in this bowl of a space with our fire in the middle of it, and these tall trees, largely because you're so far below what would be the original slope of this hill. It's really close to a main road, but it's magical. And I think for me it's magical because I get to see it in a snapshot every 2 weeks, through the years, through the seasons, through different climate, and it's gorgeous. We always meet. There will always be some men there every 2 weeks from our group, and it's just amazing. It's a really special place, and special because of the location and because of the work we do as well. I think that I go there and I know of all the really tough work that I've done there, that I've been in tears and I've been raging angry. And for me, my story with anger is that, you know, I'm normally not been too attached to my anger. So to go to a place where you're surrounded by men who invite you to bring your anger, and they know that they can hold that for you, it's a very strange place. That's not like the normal world to me, or the world that I grew up in, where if you get angry, then oh, you know, you've got a temper and you've got to watch out. And I didn't have anger. So, and that's just one of the emotions. So you've got fear, you've got joy, and anger. So yeah, to see men go through those emotions and to know that the support is there between us, that makes it more special for me, that location. Yeah, certainly.
It's a really lovely way to describe it, and I've got a really good visualization of it, or it might not look anything like what's going on in my mind, but just like as you describe that NLP, that, you know, nature's loving palm, it feels almost like you're being kind of cradled, or you're being enveloped by nature, and it's supporting you through the process. So whoever chose that location, I think it sounds to me like they chose it for a reason, and it helps the gentlemen that are there. So when you arrive at a session, how does it make you feel to be in that location and have these eye group sessions in that location? What are the feelings that you have at the beginning of a session or as you're arriving?
It changes depending what's going on in my life, but very often I'm late for the eye group, which is an issue in itself, because it starts at 7 o'clock, and if you're late, you have to hold yourself accountable. And I don't like holding myself accountable for being late, because I'm always late, and it's the same repeating pattern in me, which is something I have to work on for probably the rest of my life. We'll see. But the feelings that I get when I arrive, over more recent, so I've been there since 2016, so more recently I've got a little bit better at not being late. I wouldn't say arriving on time, but yeah, comments often are made when I'm maybe 5 minutes early. They question if it's me or my twin brother. The feelings I get, it like raw excitement quite often, just because I don't know we've got this rigid framework that tells us what the rounds are, what the emotions are that we will likely, that the emotions that the archetypes will use for each round represent, and it's all so laid out and so clear. But within that, there's so much chaos, and you don't know where a man's work is going to go. You don't know who's going to have a charge with you because you've said something in your check-in that makes another man angry or upset. It's just bizarre. So it's hard to say the emotions I have on the way in. I would say all of them at different times. And more recently, I'm someone who's definitely a part of the group. I've been going since 2016. You know, you play different parts along the way, but I've covered most of those now, I think. So yeah, depending how settled I am in my life, in my immediate landscape of my feelings, my thoughts, how organized I am, conversations I've had with people, things I'm worrying about, things I'm excited about, that just normally I'm normally I'm running to get there, so I sprint over the road and along the path and through the woodland, and then turn a corner to see the fire in the distance in this bowl of a space, and I start walking as if I've got all the time in the world, and then I think, yeah, back again, probably almost late again, but I'm here again, and I'm fully committed to supporting these men as they are to me. And we're all different characters, you know. Some men get there, I don't know, bloody half an hour early and light the fire and sit there and relax. And I want to be that man one day, but that's not where I'm at. So I would, when you say which emotions, I would say all of them at different times. And more recently, I'm more settled as I arrive, because I'm more familiar with how it can go in any number of directions through that evening, and I'm more able to hold that, because I'm a better man through turning up, and I'm more familiar with the different ways it can go. Yeah.
So we've kind of set the scene. We're in this beautiful copse held.
Well done.
Nature.
Copse, not woodland.
Copse,
thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you arrive every Thursday. You know, the passage of time through the year, the seasons come, the seasons change. You see the place move through and transition through, you know, the glory of the English countryside. And you've touched on several times this kind of the structure, and kind of mentioned the archetypes before, and it's this framework that you move through. It would be interesting just to have like a snapshot of that, of how the evening then kind of unfolds as you move through this process.
Yeah. So for us at the Bath Eye group is, I mean, there is a framework, but people go about it different ways. So if it's in someone's front room, chances are there's not going to be a bonfire in the middle of the front room, depending where you are, what's going on. But there is a main framework which is MKP. So you arrive, and then there's a smudging in, which we use sage. I think it's white sage, and that sounds really hippie-ish, but we use it to cleanse ourselves, to arrive in a space and be present. And I'm guessing it wasn't the military man from America that came up with that part of the idea. It was probably the artist man. But you arrive in a space and you settle. So if you're someone who is late normally, then you get that opportunity to be smudged in by another man there, and they it's completely their own words, but it's a welcome from one man to another to say, this is your space, this is my space, here we are again. Everything you brought with you is welcome. Everything you brought will be held. Your feelings, your emotions, your doubts, your worries, all of it, and everything you don't know you're bringing as well. Everything in the dark there, it's welcome, and it will be held by these men, these brothers, your brothers, and welcome. And then it goes on round and passes in. So there's the smudging in before any sort of part of the well, no, it is part of the evening. That's the start. So then we stand in circle and we recognize or welcome in the 4 directions, initial directions. And then we've got a couple of other directions as well. So we've got start in the east, which is the lover, the archetype of the lover. And we have totem animals for each direction at the first 4, and an emotion as well. So the gateway emotion for the lover is grief. So for me, that was like, oh God, first getting to that. And for me, a bit of a sidetrack, but for me with grief, I was so intent on being this cartoon of a human who always had the punchline and the funny response to any situation. That was really difficult for me, because I thought, well, if I start being sad, I don't know if I'll stop. I really struggled with that. I thought, this isn't good for me. I don't feel comfortable. Don't really want to look at this part of what we're doing. But I did feel safe when we got into it. So a large part of the group is trusting these other men who you don't really know outside the group. I don't really know outside the group. So lover, east, time of day is morning, in the morning. I've forgotten the color now, which is brilliant. I think it's yellow. I do know all this, honest. And you move on. Oh, the totem animal. We have a totem animal, which is probably not the army man from the States again, more probably the artist man, is the eagle or a falcon, anything that flies high and gets an overview, a clear perspective. So that's your first direction. And then we turn to the south, which is the archetype of the warrior. So the color here is red. The emotion is anger. And the totem animal for us is the robin with his red breast and how he defends territory fearlessly against any size, all comers. So it's about clean anger, about getting things done, a clear boundary between you and whoever you're facing. It's about warrior energy, and it has a different feeling to the lover round. So the lover round is when that comes after at the moment I'm describing the check-in where we recognize these different areas and then we drop into each of those areas. So when you're in the lover round, it's a check-in. You talk hopefully from your heart about feelings. It's suggested that you stay away from story. It's whatever's up for you at the moment. And then you go on, and it's aimed that you sit in respectful silence until it's your turn, and then you talk. And normally you have an amount of time that someone will give you an acknowledgement that time is up. So that's lover round. We've sort of dropped into how the rounds go as well as what happens. So back out to acknowledging the archetypes and the directions. We've just covered lover and warrior, and then we turn again to another direction. So over to the west, we've got the archetype of the magician. So this is the totem color here is black, and the totem animal is the bear or the badger, because they retreat. So the magician is about introspection. It's about cool, logical thought. It's about getting an idea of how to progress, how to move forwards, a plan, an idea. The emotion here is fear, and all of these archetypes have a flip side, like a shadow. So a lover in their best form is it's all about connection, but a wounded lover would be about retreat. A wounded warrior, it doesn't go well if you're not in the best version of these archetypes. So that's the magician, and then moving on, you've got the sovereign in the north. So the king. The color here is white, and the emotion is joy, and it's about blessings and gratitude. So those are the 4 archetypes, and then we go following on with that. We look above to a masculine energy. So the color there is blue. I don't know that there's a totem animal. Oh, sorry, for the sovereign, it's a totem animal is the stag, like the king and the herd. So then back to masculine energy up above. The classic line from this is, that I always remember is how would your life look if you had adequate masculine energy as a child and growing up? And that catches me out quite a lot because my father wasn't really present and there weren't many male role models. So I always think, yeah, what would that look like? And then I think for getting to know these men, there's so many stories there where it's just like, if we had men like us in front of us when we were growing up, it would be such a different place. So from masculine up above, we go down to feminine down below, which is nurturing, life-giving. Color is green. And we're invited, when we look up to masculine, we turn our attention upwards to the stars and infinite beyond, and then down to the feminine is nurturing ground, that cool, wet ground that all life comes from. Loving, ever giving, non-questioning, just always giving. So once you've done that journey, you do feel quite different. And because it's often a different man describing each part of that, depending where it starts in the circle of men, depending how many men are there, who's saying which bit, it can feel really, really different just listening to those men talk. From feminine, then we go to the final place, which is the human being, the man, and the color there is golden. So that's when we talk about everything mixing and coming together, all of those different archetypes and those directions, they all come in. And that's more or less said from however you feel about that, if it's your turn to talk and it comes to you. And then we're left with, normally we have an elder blessing at the Bath Eye group. So one man has said he would like to be the elder at the start of the night, probably before smudging, and he'll talk, or we seem to have gotten into a really lovely spell at the moment with our eye group of singing, which isn't something I'd choose to do really, but some people bring beautiful songs that they said they've heard themselves, that they've made, or just call and repeat, or some melody from somewhere, and we just join in, and it's gorgeous. It's such a sort of heartening way to start it, and the elder blessing comes in at the end again then as well. So that, in a bit of a messy nutshell, is us acknowledging the directions, and then from that we run into the first round, which is the lover round. So then it repeats: lover, warrior, magician, sovereign, and then an elder blessing to take us out, and that's the end of the session. So starts at 7, finishes later on. I never remember what time it finishes. I think it's 9:30. I may have that completely wrong. First round is the lover round. As I said, you talk and everyone else listens, and normally you have an amount of time depending how many men are there, so they each get an equal share. After lover round comes warrior round, which is clean anger. So you are offered, this is where it doesn't change. It's about clean energy. We're all stood up. It's about being clear, and the work that goes on in the warrior round means that we're able to work cleanly and without compromise in the magician round. And the magician round is where we do the shadow work, or where a man will bring his issues, which through the night we will have heard where each man's at. So you might have one man say, I'm in the best place I've ever been, everything's great, I love it. And meanwhile the man next door is, I'm separating from my wife, my car's died, my cat just got run over, this is shit, I don't like it. And you get a feel of where the general consensus is of the night. So yeah, that's that. So the warrior round is about clean anger. So does any man here have a charge? No, that's not right. Would any man here like to hold himself accountable? So if it's me turning up late again, then it's like, yes, I'd like to hold myself accountable for turning up late. And then we run a process through that. Would any man like to offer the gift of accountability to another man here? So it's about being clear. Again, you just hold yourself accountable, then you offer, if you know another man might need some assistance and a little push up to be like, look, I think we agreed that you said you were going to do this for me and it never happened. So I'm going to bring it to this circle and we'll sort it out. So a man can either refuse that offer, or he can go for it, and another process is run where hopefully at the end of that process he becomes clear. So then the end of the warrior round is look into these men's eyes around you. Do any of these men, do you feel a charge with any of these men? Are you unable to work in the next round because of something, some energy, some words this man's given you, or a feeling that you're getting that will stop you working with this man in the next round? And then we run a process through that. And through that process, other men can get triggered and go, well, now I've got a charge with you because you said this in that process. Or it can roll on. My experience of our group is because it seems to be a circle of repeating men who are generally always there. It's not often that the warrior round takes a lot of time. It's quite a quick round. So that's that one. After warrior round, we then move into magician. So we have already heard what's going on in men's worlds, in their lives, what they're thinking about, what they need to work on, if they need to work on anything. And then we do that. So we say, right, who wants to work? If you had a piece of work, what would it be? What would it look like? And we go around and talk about that. Sometimes it's, I haven't got a piece of work tonight, or it's, I am raging about this thing in my life and I don't know how to deal with it, or this is how I want to deal with it and I need you to do this for me. And then that turns into, a piece of shadow work, where you have a facilitator or several facilitators helping a man unpack the things he's got going on. So for me, with a story of a sister who died young, an absent father, there was a lot for me to unpack. And it gets unpacked in different ways. So I was trying to think of an example, but I don't think I need to do that right now. Maybe we'll come on to that later. Generally, that's the round where just sounds really cheap, where magic happens. It's just so organic, and it can go so many different ways, and normally it's just stunning to see how it unfolds. It's brilliant. So that's the magician round, and then we move into the sovereign round, which is blessings and gratitude. So what have you got gratitude for? What do you wish to bless in your life? And it's about the language you use. So it's not, I think I'd like to bless, just nice things. It's you're being clear, and you are certain of what you're blessing. So I wish to bless my partner for all the support they give me, or I wish to bless everything that's gone right at work because I've made those changes and now it's coming back for me and it's great, or anything. But it's done with clarity and conviction. It's not loose, really. And then an elder blessing to take us out, and we're done. So that's the structure.
Honestly, I have been mesmerized whilst you've been describing it. I really have. And so many things connect with me. I have a very strong connection to paganism, and a lot of what you've described there with the directions and the colours and the smudging in. I smudge my house all the time, and things like that. There's a lot of similarities there, I think, to a lot of the sort of pagan connection with nature. And I guess because you are also outdoors at the same time, by the sounds of it, not all of these sessions always happen outdoors. For you guys, you're always outdoors. There's that extra connection, as you said, having the feminine below you, underneath, but also actually physically being on that ground. I guess you can take your shoes and socks off if you wanted to, and physically
that does happen.
Grounded with nature. And the other thing that really struck with me is things like your use of language and the linguistic side of it. So you're dealing with some really tough topics, but the language that's used would enable people to deal with those topics in a safe way, which linking this to coaching is what we always endeavor to be able to do ourselves as coaches. So, you use words like organic and inviting and connecting, supporting, gratitude, blessings. There's lots of very, these aren't necessarily soft words, but they are safer, ways of describing some of these very difficult, processes you've described. And I think for me, it'd be fascinating to find out more about how you work within a rigid process and a rigid structure, but it's all wrapped up in the wonderful world of nature and the natural environment, which is so not structured and very organic. How do the two work together for you, and how does the nature side of things add to this process for you?
As the men's group's rolling on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I've touched on, because we're there every fortnight, it is like going through, I've got to name drop a book called Overstory, I was going to say it's like going through a flick book. And this book I just finished this morning, and I was like, right, going to do it again. And I just completely wrapped up in it. It's an amazing book. And part of the start of the book is a few generations of farming men. They planted this tree, and every, I don't know if it's every year or I think it's every month. It must be every month he takes a photo of this book. And for us, going to the woods, it's like living in that flick book, because you're only there every fortnight, and some weeks you can feel like it's exactly the same, it hasn't changed, and other weeks it's drastically different. Like there's suddenly no leaves, or there's a first flash of green, or there's so much garlic on the way up there, and you can smell it. And for a fair while, it's just so beautiful up there. Just that, even the short process of the garlic. So it's recognizing that, as I said before, it's all changing, it's all moving. The dial turns each time. And then when we are doing different processes, like we're there in the dark at the moment, and there's just the firelight to help us out, and that gives a really ancient feel to it. These men that I know fairly well from what goes on around this fire, that most have been there 3 or 4 years now. We've got some new ones, and they're great as well, but you're sat around the fire and you're looking at these flickering, silhouetted, highlighted faces, and so talk about either their pain or their joy, and it's so raw. It's just epic. And that's just the love around, and then things happening in Magician Round. I can remember beautiful moments in summer where someone's thrown something into the fire, and it erupts just at the point that he's letting go of something, and it's just so symbolic. It's beautiful. And then that's just the plants and the trees, and we're surrounded by, we've got rooks kicking off, we've got owls. And so often it's like, I'm going to be more aware, and then there's this owl kicks off, and it's like, well, there you go. What more symbolic thing have you got for an animal that's aware than an owl that just sees everything and hears everything and sits up on high? And we're stumbling over ourselves with that sort of stuff, and it in the men's group it happens regularly, and we're just grateful for it. We're so lucky to have this space to be outside and to do this, what we feel is such significant and deep work that helps us to stabilize ourselves one fortnight to the next. And I think, as Anna spoke, she sees me when I come back from the woods, and she's like, oh, looks like something went well in the woods tonight. And it's just a good, I think it's a very needed and necessary journey for men and women to sit in nature and seriously share what they've got going on. And the flags that pop up around us because of nature, they're what I think you spoke about the magic, Alex. So I'd say that's the magic, is when there's that overlap between what we're feeling and what we're saying and what we're doing, and that other layer or whichever layer above or below, the nature that is completely in sync and is just offering that reassurance that you're doing it right. It's working. It's good work. Maybe slightly biased, but yeah.
And it's these spaces where, I don't know, men can come together, or women can come together, or we can come together as just groups, or as, doing pair work, that to have these conversations, in person, in nature, it just doesn't happen that often, in this frantic, busy world, to make the time to go through this process, which for you is, it's 2.5 hours, to really settle, to really ground, to let things kind of unfold, and just to kind of to make space for that. It's a ritual. And when kind of just connecting to our kind of coaches who are out there listening in, it's almost having this, as a coach, what are you facilitating as your client meets you? How do you welcome them? How do you ground them? How do you use some of these how do you kind of use some of the framework that Joe's been talking about, and invite some of the archetypes into the conversations? How do we really be grateful for what we have got? How can we be the magician in certain places? How can we in a way acknowledge our elders, which is something, particularly within the Western world, is the wisdom of the elder is just not really valued at all. So there's so much richness and depth, and this whole rite of passage is something that we are sorely lacking. And there's so much, and almost kind of turning it back to you, and this is probably quite a difficult question to kind of answer, because there's been so much. It's in a way, like, what has MKP given you? And if you're able to maybe capture like the essence of it in an example, if you're willing or able to share, that would be amazing. I know our kind of listeners like kind of the tangible kind of case studies that they can really kind of add context to the framework that you've been talking about.
What has MKP given me? It's made me. It's given me, or has it made me? Has it made me? MKP has offered me the opportunity to step into the possibilities of me being a better man. It's invited me to be more in touch with my feelings, and I think a few times I've spoken to you through this call, my voice has wavered, and I used to be terrified of, as I said, if I was going to be emotional from a few years ago, I wouldn't have known if that was going to stop. I thought, if I start crying now, I don't know if I'm going to stop. I don't know how to stop, because I was so full of grief through the loss of my sister, and maybe other things that I wasn't aware how to list or didn't even recognize back then. But the big thing was the loss of my sister, and I didn't carry that well at all, and it was difficult for me for a long time. But MKP has allowed me repeatedly to look at that loss, and to look at death, and to look at connection with others, and what that means to me. And I'm more able to be emotional and almost fearlessly emotional now. I don't worry what people will think. I just know that if I'm being authentic, then whatever folds out in front of me and for these other people, I'm probably going to be able to hold it quite well, because of my experiences at MKP. I can be stable while others are crumbling if that's what happens, because of me being authentic, which is quite a big thing. I feel that's a massive like internal support to me, to know that I have that stability now, whereas before it was, I could have been furiously angry at things and not know how to let that out, because I was someone who didn't get angry. So there was a spell when I was at MKP, and I was driving my car once, and someone crossed the road in front of me when there's a zebra crossing further up the road. And because I've been at MKP, I was able to connect with my masculine anger, and I got out of the car and went, "What are you doing? There's a zebra crossing up the road." And I was being completely authentic. Like, I wasn't angry, but I was just saying, "You're being an idiot. There's a zebra crossing over there. Why are you walking in front of..." And then I sort of backtracked a little bit and recognized I was in the middle of a town centre, and there were several people looking at me, and I wasn't being an angry man. I was just highlighting what I thought two people were doing wrong, and they happened to be two quite big masculine men, and there's me who's not the biggest man. So there have been points along the way where MKP maybe has given me a distorted sense of what I can be, but that was coming from me. That particular story was me believing that I was just highlighting to someone that you could be a lot safer there. That's, you didn't need to do that. So yeah, it's given me stability, self-belief, self-worth, which was very much lacking for a very long time. Just wasn't there. And standing beside these other men, hearing their stories and going, oh, they're scared of that as well. Well, they don't know what to do in that situation. Well, I was in that situation last year, and with the help of these men, I've managed to. I feel like I could offer mine. And there's that recognition and realization that for quite a lot of the time, quite a lot of people are actually making it up as they go along. They don't actually know because they haven't actually lived it. They've heard that someone else told them it might be like that, so they're going to go along with what they think it might be until it's their own experience. No one knows what it's like. You can read all about it, but you can't feel it, really, I don't think. So for me, it's that knowledge that I'm just as good as anyone else, and I may be a bit better on some things and a bit worse, but I have worth now. I'm more calibrated. I'm better calibrated because of the support that I find and the support I'm able to give as well. Yeah.
I think listening to what you were saying there, it links quite a lot to the research out there on outdoor coaching, and the fact that people being outdoors versus indoors having these conversations enables this emotion to come out, and then enables the emotion to dissipate. And one person described in some of the research that I did that she couldn't understand how anybody could have coaching indoors, because how could you sit in a room with all that emotion locked in the room with you? So if you talk about something, how on earth can you let it go when it just stays within the four walls that you're sitting in? Whereas if you're outdoors, you can talk about it, express it, deal with it, and let it go, because there's an infinite world for it to float away into. And so when you were describing that, it really brought back another example of that experience of being able to deal with it that way.
And I guess you'd have to, if you are in a room as a facilitator or a coach, then I'd hope that you're very skilled at being able to hold that energy, because then you're as the professional, you have to hold that. So what do you do with it?
Yeah,
it's difficult. It's really difficult. If you do feel that you're in a box with it, certainly. Yeah.
So I think it's really, it's fascinating to hear your experiences of it and what it's given you, and how the process has helped you and supported you. And continues to as well. The fact that you've been doing this, since 2016, and you continue to every 2 weeks, it's a commitment, but it's a strong commitment you're making to yourself, and to also to the other men as well. You want, I guess it's nice to have similar faces each week and be able to kind of trust in each other, and again, have that kind of safe conversation. So it'd be really great for our listeners and our watchers, if you could signpost where they can find out more about MKP, because I would imagine there's probably quite a lot of people who've been listening to this going, I want to find out more. I need to go and find out where my nearest group is, for instance. Where can people go to find out more about MKP?
Well, yeah, as I said before, there's different eye groups all over the place. Probably near every major city, there's probably an eye group that's doing something similar to what we do. But also with that, we have an open night for people who aren't initiated, who haven't gone through that weekend that I went to in Ireland back in 2016. So there are open nights. Ours only happens once every quarter through the year, just because we got a bit fed up with having to describe, as I've described this evening, the processes and what happens and what this is for. And we just thought, we're not getting loads each time. Why not just push it to a point? And it came to a consensus that actually, let's go one a quarter, that's fine. So different eye groups have their own rules and ways of being. So it may be that one eye group welcomes everyone, uninitiated men, all the time. Others might be, we don't have uninitiated men until this date. So yeah, that's the first point to consider. And the second point is there's not just MKP. I'm sure there's many other men's groups. There's things like the men's shed, which is where probably slightly older guys get together and fix things or do things for the community. And I think that's a similar thing. I mean, I'm guessing they haven't got the framework we have, but that's another sort of route to look at. And also there's similar organization to ours called A Band of Brothers, which is all about mentoring. So as a man, you turn up there and you get to do all the work, I believe, that I've spoken about that happens at MKP. But in addition to that, their aim is to give a hand out to people who may need mentoring or support, normally younger men. So there's a whole extra layer there, which for me, it's through my time with MKP. It's probably not a view held by everyone, but I go to MKP to do the work for me. And then because I'm a better person, that radiates out from me, and that's great. But primarily I'm doing the work for me and to support the men there. And I personally, this is just me, see A Band of Brothers as they're doing the work so they can help other people up as well. So that it's much more looking outwards rather than MKP probably going to get told off for this, but is looking inward. I'm doing the work on me so that I'm better, whereas Band of Brothers is looking out. So the two, it's just a website really. I think it's the Mankind Project is just, I don't think I ever said the tagline for the Mankind Project is recapturing the sacred masculine. I don't know if I said that or not.
At the beginning.
Okay. So then the tagline for A Band of Brothers is their vision, is a world where every man fulfills their potential with a sense of meaning, connection, and purpose. Which I don't think is a bad thing, really. That would imagine if that was going on with our leaders, that'd be pretty good news. That's those two sites, Band of Brothers and the Mankind Project, and I've got a couple of books as well, which looks at basically the archetypes, the Jungian archetypes, and describes them for men. And one's called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. I think that was published in 1991. And then you might think I'm a little bit biased here. This is written by a man from my Bath I group, so of course I'm going to plug it. This is written by Rod Boothroyd in 2018, and yeah, he's a great man. His is called Warrior, Magician, Lover, King, and it's those principles he says redesigned for the 21st century. So that's about all the signposting I can do, really. But yeah, these initiation weekends at Mankind Project, they happen regularly all over the place. They different countries. They kick off in Ireland. There's normally, before COVID, they were pretty frequent, and then of course COVID took quite a big dent in what was going on. So normally they happen at least twice a year, if not 4 or 5 times a year. Before COVID, I've not been to a staffing since COVID. I went to one before. I've staffed one weekend, and you get men who've staffed tens of weekends, and it's as important a part of being part of the MKP for them as the I group is. And mine was epic as well when I went to service, support men coming through. So yeah, that's that.
Wow, thank you for sharing so much about your backstory and talking so openly and giving us an insight into the Mankind Project, which men's groups, they're just not really talked about. Or even I go to a ladies' circle.
Because men don't talk, Hannah.
Well, the men don't. Well, yeah.
Why would men talk about their feelings? You might end up crying in front of another man, and you can't have that, can you? It's a problem.
But it's almost like men getting together and women getting together and like just sitting in circle and listening to each other is, when we go back to the past, when we look at a lot of Indigenous people, it is central to the way that they live and the way that they make decisions and the way how they consciously choose to move forwards. Yeah.
Sharing and to hear and to be heard is important, I think, in any social setting, and whether it's coaching and you're in the boardroom or wherever it is that clever people sit with their suits on, and if they don't hear the other person, then you're at a loss, aren't you? You need to listen. And I think a large part of what we do is we just sit and listen to each other, and we recognize the differences and the similarities, and then we go through that. And I think that's important, certainly.
And bringing it back to that, the coaching and the coaching work that we do with our clients, that holding space and listening is absolutely key. And I'm sure that our listeners and watchers will go back and kind of cherry pick out all the different nuggets from this conversation, whether it's around, really partnering with nature, and that NLP, nature's loving palm, is definitely an NLP that I will remember. And is just so kind of gentle and so inviting. And what kind of, it come up, and actually how as coaches, how can we encourage our clients to be open to this? Is that invitation, which is so important. So thank you so much, Jo, for coming. And I really hope that having this perspective will really encourage our listeners and watchers, kind of men and women, men to be more open about this, and for women as well to be receptive and to signpost. Ultimately starting the conversation is the first step, and then actually what can emerge from that. So I do appreciate it's been like a little bit of a different interview this week. We were really keen to get you on, kind of ultimately to hear more about your experience, but also about the kind of the process. And coaching can sometimes be very process led. Some coaches really enjoy having that framework. So this, I think, really gives an insight into what what you have received, kind of almost within like that group facilitation setting, where coaching skills are so paramount.
Yeah, I'd say that. And there is such a rigid framework that there's so much space to be organic around that, and to know, all right, so we've got this long, our sessions last this long, there's this many people, we've each got this amount of time, but you can talk about anything you want in that time. And some man might just sit and just be really sad and almost end up crying in that check-in round, and you get a real sense of their emotion. But it's because there's such rigidity there that there's space to be flexible within that. And if as coaches people are taking people outside, then nature's pretty flexible. And if you've got this amount of time and you use what's around you, then that's an epic background, a beautiful backdrop to just let rip into. Very well supported, with nature, I think.
Perfect. So big thank you, Jo.
Pleasure.
And thank you to everyone kind of listening in, watching in today. Clearly, if you haven't discovered our back catalogue, do check them out on our website, coachingoutdoors.com. That's coachingoutdoors.com. And any kind of comments that you would kind of like to share with our community, please do jump on the LinkedIn community. If you're not a member already, do join. And then, we'd love to hear your thoughts around this.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network,
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
thanks so much in advance for your support.